Let the fear of no one dismay thee. Trust in the Lord thy God, for he is sufficient unto whomsoever trusteth in him. He verily shall protect thee, and in him shalt thou abide in safety. Baha'u'llah. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not, behold your God. Well is it with him who hath been illumined with the light of trust and detachment. Baha'u'llah.
O sincere servant of the True One, I hear thou art grieved and distressed at the happenings of the world and the vicissitudes of fortune. Wherefore this fear and sorrow? The true lovers of the Abha beauty, and they that have quaffed the cup of the covenant, fear no calamity, nor feel depressed in the hour of trial. They regard the fire of adversity as their garden of delight, and the depth of the sea, the expanse of heaven. Abdu'l-Baha.
So this week, we're so happy to have Dr. John Woodall, and he'll be talking about a life without fear. Dr. Woodall is a psychiatrist, formerly on the faculty of Harvard Medical School, with special expertise in post-traumatic stress disorder, resilience, and treatment-resistant depression. He was director of the State Department refugee relief effort in the Balkans after the war there, and the convener of the Resilient Responses to Social Crisis Working Group at Harvard University. At the request of the Mayor's Office of New York City, he developed and implemented a citywide resilience building program for children after 9/11 that was also implemented in New Orleans and Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina and in northern Uganda. Since the Newtown tragedy, he's launched a series of resilience building efforts there. He is medical director of Synergy Health in Newtown, where he specializes in brain health, treatment-resistant depression, and resilience. So with that, I'll hand it off to Dr. Woodall.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you all for coming. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Connecticut, and so if you're devoting your time to being online on a beautiful day, thank you, and I hope I can justify your sacrifice of your time to be here today. When I was asked to do a presentation again, I was in the middle of really just searching in myself for answers to what in my own life are fears, what in my practice as a psychiatrist in Newtown are helping people manage fears that they deal with on a daily basis, and that were all aggravated because of the horrible tragedy that happened here 10 years ago with the school shooting. And you know, it reminded me of that story of Gandhi, who someone approached him and said, Bapu, can you teach me how to quit smoking? And he said, yes, I can. And he said, well, please do teach me how to quit smoking. And he said, but you have to come back in 30 days. I'll teach you in 30 days. So he was a little confused, the man, and he said, well, okay. And he went away. And 30 days later, he came back and asked Gandhi, well, will you teach me how to quit smoking now? And Gandhi said, yes, I will. Then the man said, well, why did you make me wait 30 days? And Gandhi said, I had to quit smoking first. He had to learn how to quit smoking himself. And so I feel in a similar way it's a little bit presumptuous to say, I'm going to be teaching about the elimination of fear, which is only the most central issue in all religious texts and all philosophies throughout history. But so rather, I would like to point towards a way to understand fear. And as life would have it, this morning I was confronted with a fear with my dog Tennyson, or Tenny, we call him. He's a golden doodle, and at 5 o'clock he wants to go out for he wants to go and do his business outside and then come in and have breakfast. And we've got a second dog also that we picked up during COVID. So I let him out at 20 after 5, and they usually are out 5 minutes and come back. And 5 minutes went by, and Jack, the one dog, he came back, but Tenny didn't come back. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I was out looking all over the neighborhood for him, couldn't find him. 5 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning. I can't be calling out too loudly for him, but I got in the car, I'm driving around looking all over for him, couldn't find him. And I was afraid for him. I didn't, because there's some foxes that have nested in next, or they've created a den in our under our shed in the backyard. And so I thought, boy, did he get attacked by the foxes, or did he get picked up? And so I was afraid for him. And I was also mourning him before I even knew what was going on. I thought, oh my God, what if something bad happened to him? This response of mine is what the Buddhists call inevitable, that it's one of the two major fears that all humans have. The first one is of death itself. Did something bad happen to Tenny? Or God forbid, something did. So it immediately aroused in me my own fears for Tenny's safety. Interestingly enough, that fear is really a sign of my love for him, right? So you don't fear the loss of something you don't particularly care for. But when we value something, when we see, when we extend our love and receive love from a pet or another human being, the thought of that loss is one of the fundamental fears that humans have, that death will somehow separate us from something or someone that we love. So there it was this morning. I thought, well, perfect. I have to do my Gandhi thing here, and I'm going to have to figure this fear out before the talk at 12 o'clock. So life is good at presenting us with the thing we have to teach. So I wanted to just put that story and bookmark it. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Oh, we found Tenny, by the way. The neighbor saw him chasing the foxes, and he was in some brambles and mud and dirt and woods a couple of blocks away. But we pulled him out of there. He's a mess, but he's okay. So now I wanted to tell you a second story to emphasize what is really the second biggest cause of the deepest fears that humans have. The first one being the impermanence of life itself, represented by our own death. And the second is an emptiness, a fear of emptiness. Let me give you an example. So I mentioned I'm in Newtown, and I have my psychiatric practice in Newtown, where this horrific school shooting happened 10 years ago. It's an utter horror. And it remains a horror now, more than 10 years after the event. And the kids who were in the school at the time are now seniors in high school, juniors and seniors in high school. And they're showing up in my clinic anxious, depressed, afraid. Now, what are they afraid of? What keeps coming up is a sense of emptiness that they have, that a world of meaning, a life of meaning seems impossible to them. How could the world have meaning? And how can I have a purpose within this world if this world is capable of producing a mass shooting in the school that I'm going to when I'm in second grade? Now, these aren't the kind of issues most of us have to deal with, but the kids in my town do, and in many, many towns around this country at any rate. So for her, the experience is a sense of profound and overwhelming emptiness, that the world seems frighteningly hollow, that not only is the world unsafe, but that she feels she has no purpose in it. Or I'm thinking of a specific student now. So I'm going to come back to her also, but this emphasizes the second thing that the Buddhists, for instance, talk about as the two root causes of fear. One is the sense of the fear of death, and the other is the sense of emptiness. Now, Baha'is use a phraseology of powerlessness, that these are two forces of life that we are powerless over, and that instead of fearing these two realities, that we need to acquiesce to them and take comfort in knowing that God is He is our help in peril, and He is capable of helping us at any moment. But this dilemma of how to deal with death and the reality of this sense of the possibility of emptiness in our life is really at the core of not only of all fear, but what all religions address: how to manage, how to deal with, how to perceive, how to relate to these two big issues. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And I was asked to speak about the basic teachings of the Baha'i faith. And I thought I would do it in the context of these realities of the fact that we're all going to die, and the fact that when we're in the quiet of our own rooms, there is this sense of the possibility of emptiness or meaninglessness. So the basic, again, this is a huge topic, but one of the ways the Baha'i faith talks about this is that the founders of all the world's great religions throughout history have reassured humanity that our reality, our truest reality, is beneath these fears, right? That we need not allow the fear of our own death or the fear of emptiness and purposelessness. We need not allow these things to run our lives, but that beneath these is a sea of grace, is that the fabric of the universe is kneaded with divine love and divine grace and mercy and forgiveness. And so the spiritual path is really about letting go of fears enough to allow ourselves to perceive with more refinement this deeper reality within us. That it's talked about metaphorically in the Baha'i writings as gems that are contained within our inmost reality, that the signs of these great qualities of love and mercy, forgiveness and grace, they're reflected in each of us in what is called a gem, a gem of divine virtue: our patience, our love, our gratitude, our endurance, our perseverance, our compassion, our knowledge and wisdom, our humility. That these are like gems within the human reality, that our purpose in life is to bring those gems out, right? And that we do that largely through the way we address our fears, right? How we address the challenges of life that cause us to fear our own death, or to fear that somehow our life will come to nothing because of financial difficulties or problems in the family, or illness, or lack of social status or oppression of some form, that our purpose in life will be thwarted by some element of our life that is inhibiting us from having a full life. So all of the world's great religions say that there is a reality beneath all of this turmoil of life that really, once we engage with it, brings out these gems of divine virtue, and that we needn't fear. That fear is the thing that prevents us from seeing that divine reality within us. And the Baha'i teachings go on to explain in a marvelous way how this basic idea of bringing individuals and communities and humanity as a whole to a deeper understanding of our own reality is a story that's been evolving throughout recorded history in the various religions of the world, that all of them have been unfolding this idea that there is a deeper nature to human reality that we have access to, and that we need not fear. Right? In the Psalms, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." And in the epistle to Timothy, it says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear." In the Quran, it says, "Verily on the friends of Allah there is no fear, nor shall they grieve." So this idea of moving past fear into these deeper levels of our reality are the core teachings of all the world's great religions, and that the vehicle that helps us move through our fear is love. Right? So each of the world's great religions teaches this in one form or another. And Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, explained that to each age in history, a special being has appeared who has brought this understanding about God to humanity, that they've been a mouthpiece of God to humanity at the particular time, and conforming their teachings to the particular age and needs of a particular time. So the religions basically had two elements. There's a core spiritual teaching, which is what I've been talking about, that there is this deeper nature within us, that it is our purpose in life to bring out, and it's the purpose of religion to help us bring that out. And then there's a second part of religion, which is conforming those universal spiritual teachings to a particular time and place to meet the needs of a particular time and place. So the teachings of Abraham, for instance, were directed towards a family, a tribe, but again, speaking about this basic spiritual idea. And then sometime later, when this one tribe is now 12 tribes, the same teaching is given new form in the teachings of Moses. And then centuries later, these same ideas are refined and brought to humanity in the form of the Gospels that Jesus taught. And then several hundred years later, through the revelation of the Quran, the same basic idea is now expanded to beyond tribes, 12 tribes, city-states, to the idea of the first nation in the world, of a nation of believers who are working to bring these gems out as a collective. Baha'u'llah said that if the followers of any of the world's religions would have really done the work, and if clergy and dogma and superstition and oppression hadn't interfered with these teachings, that any one of these religions could have gained global benefit, or could have been the agency for uniting the planet. But because of superstition, because of religious hierarchies and conflict, that when humans turn the cause of upliftment and unity into a cause of violence and conflict, that it destroys the foundations of religion. And therefore another founder of a religion comes kind of to clean up the mess on the one hand, but also to bring the teachings to a larger segment of humanity. The exciting and wonderful conclusion to this idea is Baha'u'llah says that the time has now come for humanity to see that there has always only been one plan. There's always only been one covenant between God and humanity to bring out these gems of divine virtue from the human reality and to unite all humanity around those. So the Baha'i teachings say, Baha'u'llah says that this is the age of fulfillment. This is the age of the fulfillment of the promise of all religions, where through Baha'u'llah's coming, he is the latest of these, what Baha'is call manifestations of God, who has brought teachings to humanity, but this time to the entire planet. So all of the things that have separated us, we can now see are just man-made. They're not things that are fundamental to our reality. There's no difference between the aspiration of a sincere Jew or a sincere Buddhist or a sincere Christian or Muslim or Native American or an atheist even. If they're sincere in their search for truth, their desire to be humble and service to others, that we are all in this together. So Baha'u'llah's teachings are really all about how to provide for the evolution of a global community that respects its diversity and builds on its diversity to create something the world has never seen before, which is global unity. So in that context, I wanted to talk about fear, and let's go back to that young student I was talking to you about a little bit earlier, who felt very depressed, and she had been suicidal, thinking that What's the point of living if every memory I have of the world is that it's an unsafe place, that my playmates when I was a child were murdered right in the same building that I was going to school. So now here she is, a senior in high school, feeling, how in the world do I live in this world? So she had wanted to be an artist and had been talking to her parents about this, and they weren't very supportive of the idea. They wanted her to have something where she could make a decent living. And she and I began talking, and I was asking her about why she was depressed. And she said, well, I don't really know that the world is a safe place, or that I don't know how to live in the world like this. And I said, is that what's making you depressed? She said, yeah. And I said, well, that's a good reason to be depressed. So as far as I can tell, you got pretty good judgment. So, and it also tells me that you're a really kind person and you'd really like to find some way to be a part of life. These are really good reasons for you to be disappointed, because it sounds to me like these aren't the problems of a sociopath. You know, these are the problems of someone who cares a lot about the world. Is that you? Are you a person who cares a lot about the world? And she said, yes, I am. I don't know how to make it a difference. I don't know if the world's going to be around in 5 years or 10 years. And I said, well, these are exactly the kind of things that you should be worried about and depressed about, because what I was trying to do, I was trying to say to her that she's not fantasizing. These are legitimate issues. And what we need to do is come up with a path for her. We need to legitimize her concerns and then moderate them and give her a path forward. So then we started talking about beauty. We started talking about how when one looks for beauty, it stirs your own beauty. You can only perceive beauty that's within you, right? What you see externally is really just a reflection of something you have within you. So if you see the beauty of someone's kindness, it means you have kindness in you and you appreciate it, you value it. So we started talking about her becoming a seeker of beauty. So she'd go out and she'd do some drawings, but the point was to start changing her perceptions, where instead of looking at the futility of life, she was looking at the beauty that's all around her. So over time, we talked about the role of the artist and how the artist is really one of the most important people in a culture, because the artist is the one who helps people perceive the vastness of life, the beauty of life. And that, so what more important role could there be than that? And so over a couple of weeks, this young woman's depression completely lifted. And so what she was suffering from wasn't some metabolic problem with her brain, for instance. It was a destroyed sense of purpose and a destroyed sense of her place in the flow of life. So this is one of the things that all the religions teach, that if our religious experience is authentic and meaningful, it's helping us find that sense of assurance that that life has value, that life is bigger than our fears, and that we can contribute to life and it can contribute to us. And it's fear that prevents that from happening. It's our fears that prevents that. Now, I'm going to come back to all these things in just a minute, but I want to now, since we talked about death and we talked about emptiness, I want to talk about something else going on in Newtown right now. And it's something that's going on in towns across the US anyway. There is a movement to ban a couple of books from the high school library. The group that wants to do this is very afraid for their children being influenced by thoughts and social movements that they don't feel are healthy. So they don't want their children confused by other people's agendas. So they feel the way to protect their children is to keep books away from them. So there's a principle that they're trying to uphold, which is to protect their children. And the position they've taken to uphold that principle is, let's get rid of these books. So I want to make a point between a principle and a position. Now, there's another group in town that says, well, wait a minute, that's preventing freedom of speech. And, what about all the kids who are confused about their gender roles and things, and they don't have anywhere to turn for information, and maybe they're not going to ask their parents or teachers. So these books are providing them with something that might save a life, so one of these kids doesn't kill themselves. And to ban a book, that sounds like oppression of some kind. So their position is, their theme is, or their principle is, we need to protect the rights of kids who are confused to explore. And the position they take is, don't ban the book. Right? So what's happening is both of these camps are motivated by trying to do the best for children. Right? But both of these camps do not see that in the other. Both of these camps see the other as being oppressive in some way. And what's happening in the dialogue between these two groups is very hostile. And in fact, there's an article in the newspaper, in today's Newtown Bee is what it's called, that is exactly that, where one group is accusing the other one of being violent and oppressive. And then the other one is saying the same thing about the other group. So how does this relate to fear? Well, what's missing from this conversation is, what are these kids really going through? And what are the issues these kids are really facing? And I would suggest it's way beneath this. These kids are all wondering about their place in a very frightening world, and how do they move through the turmoil of this time in a way where they feel connected, a part of the flow of life, where they feel nurtured by life, where they feel inspired to contribute their best gifts, where they feel encouraged and encouraged to face the challenges of life without feeling defeated. Right? So those are the issues that I see the kids are dealing with. And on top of those things are questions about gender identity and stuff like that. But the reason those things are so charged is because the kids don't have a grounding in a sense of permanence, or a sense of connectedness to the flow of life. And if you want to call that the spirit, or if you want to call that the spiritual, that's fine. But essentially, kids don't feel a sense of they have a connection to the flow of life, to a value that makes life worth living. So going back to a Baha'i perspective on this, it's that all of these challenges that we face in life are for the purpose of bringing out these gems, these qualities that are even hidden from us. You could be standing on the side of a mountain that has rubies and diamonds 5 feet under your feet, but you wouldn't know they're there if you didn't dig. So the first thing is to know that you're more than just what you know about yourself. There are things that are wonderful and gem-like within you, that the digging of life are like the tests and the trials of life, that where we discover these gems and then refine them over a course of a lifetime. So each of the world's religions teaches this. The Baha'i perspective is on the time that we're living in, that the challenges in the time that we're in right now are all about helping us finally let go of these fears and the prejudices these fears engender, so that we see our common humanity. We're all in this process of trying to find these gems in ourselves. And that in the process of looking for these gems and looking for them in each other, we see the beauty of our common humanity. Just like my artist friend who's 18 years old, who's looking for these gems now in everyone she sees, and is using that as a way to unite with people that she previously felt alienated from. I want to go back to this Board of Education issue in Newtown. because it's an issue that is happening around the country. If we're not grounded in a sense of this deep well of human capacity, these spiritual qualities that are latent within us, we don't really have a sense of assurance in that part of ourselves, then our life is more motivated by fear than it is by love or poise or calm or contentment. And when we fear, we start to look for other things to fill that fear, or to distract us from the fear. So we look to entertainment, endless entertainment and distraction. We look to wealth. We look to social status. We look to, political ideas that seem to find a way to blame another group for all the problems in the world, so that we can feel that somehow our burden is lessened in some way. So at the root of personal unhappiness, at the root of unhappiness in a couple or a family or in a community or in a nation or the world, is fear. And the fear of this emptiness, or the fear of death, that then reifies throughout a life through trying to hold on to something, that will relieve the sense of fear. Now, the social consequences of this, I think, are pretty obvious in the division and hatred and animosity. We see it certainly in the United States. That's exemplified in the way people talk to each other, which is hostile, and where the presumption is that there is an other, and they're evil. This blaming and finding ways to denigrate and be afraid of another. All you have to do is listen to a television show, a news show, and listen to how one group is painted as something to be afraid of. Right? So these news media outlets are not our friend. If we're being pitted against each other, this is not healthy. This is not good for us individually or as a nation. So I'm taking this tack on the discussion about fear, if for no other reason, to show how unless we find a way to deal with these fears, it not only creates unhappiness in us personally, but in our families, in our relationships as couples, in our families, in our parenting, in the community, and the nation as a whole. And so the answer begins with a spiritual question. And it's not a spiritual question about what do we decide to believe, right? It's so much. But have we cultivated a sense of poise and calm and assurance, is what the Baha'i writings calls it, that despite whatever happens, we're going to be okay. That beneath any suffering or any fear, there is this ocean of loving kindness that all of us have access to, that all of the world's religions invite us to. Now, I want to share something with you, if you don't mind. I have to show you a picture of one of my heroes. His name is Haji Akund. This gentleman, he has his given name is Haji Akund. I'm sorry, he sort of has a title, and it's Haji Akund. This man, what a peculiar photograph this is. First of all, it's taken in the late 1800s, and there's some kind of a cloth behind him, right? But you look and you see he looks very calm. And look at the chains on him, and there's a stock on his leg. So what is going on in this picture? Well, let me tell you about this man. This man was one of the early Baha'is in Persia in the founding days of the Baha'i faith. And he was very well known for being very outspoken about being a Baha'i. And he had some significant status because he had previously been in the clergy as a Muslim. So now he's a Baha'i, and he's very outspoken about it. So every time there was any kind of a problem in the town or in the country, the government and the mullahs would blame it on the Baha'is, because they knew the Baha'is weren't going to fight back, or that they were nonviolent. So so every time something bad happened, Hajia Kun would get dressed up in his finest clothes like this and just wait for the authorities to come get him. And this is one of those times where he had been subjected to days and days of torture before this picture was taken. And actually one of his descendants lives not too far from me. And the stories go that in these times where he's being tortured, he wouldn't cry out, and he would be very peaceful and content. And it would drive his torturers a little bit crazy, because it, like, for instance, in this picture, this is at a time when he was arrested in Tehran, and it was the Shah's torturers who were torturing him. And he never cried out. So they would try their best torturing, and even the Shah's torturers couldn't get him to be disturbed or perturbed in any way. And the stories go in the family of this gentleman, his descendants, is that they would be torturing him to the point of their exhaustion. And just when they sat down to take a break, he'd look up and say, "Okay, you can start now." So he was mocking them, you know, he was not perturbed. I'm sure he was in pain, but he wasn't perturbed. Now, how does that happen? Well, I want to talk about that general thing in just a minute. But it was so much so that the torturers sent a message up to the Shah, because he had been in the prison underneath the palace being tortured. So they sent a message up to the Shah and said, "Look, you've got to see this guy. We've been torturing him for days, and he's just peaceful. He's never uttered a single cry." So the Shah gets puts his finest robes on, comes down to the dungeon, and the way the story goes from the family, he looked around the corner to Hajia Kun, and Hajia Kun, it wasn't all dressed up like this, but he was, you know, bloodied and with the chains and the stock on his foot. And Hajia Kun said to the Shah, said, "Your Majesty, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm in chains. I can't even move. So I'm not going to hurt you." So the Shah then came around the corner and said, "Well, of course, you know, I'm the Shah and you're my servant." And so he said, "Well, clean him up, put some clothes on him, and put that cloth, that drapery behind him, put him in a chair and take his picture." And they wanted the picture because it was so outstanding. Like, how in the world can this be that this person is not crying out? So to take a picture in the 1880s or 90s, that's a big deal. So this is the picture that was the result of the Shah's request that we get a picture of this guy. Who is he? Look at his face. You would never know that he had been tortured for days before this. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all be tortured, but what I am inviting us to is to ask, how is it possible that someone can be content in the face of that? Now, every religious tradition has myths about this condition. Daniel in the lion's den, Paul and Silas in prison or in the fire. You name a religious tradition, and there are stories of individuals who are facing extremity, horrible things that would be creating fear in us, but somehow they've escaped the clutches of fear, and they've found this state of contentment. And so this is a life's work for us all. How do we find greater measures of this sense of contentment despite what life is dishing out to us? So the spiritual path may not be at all that we pray and then something changes, that miraculously we're healed. I mean, maybe those things happen, and I'm sure they do, but what if they don't? You know, what is our condition if we are attached to the fear that somehow this impermanent life will not stay impermanent, that I want Tenny, my dog, not to be hurt, right? I want to never lose him, but he will die one day, and so will I, right? And so does that induce fear in me, or does that induce a sense of the beauty of the immensity of life, and that I have this gift of being able to be engaged with life, and that life can unfold through me, and that through the instruction from great spiritual teachers from all the great world's religions, and now through Baha'u'llah, I have an opportunity to experience the richness of life with as little fear as possible, but engaged with this in this wonderful task of bringing out these mysteries that lie within all of us, and doing so with gratitude and humility. Now, I'm going to just share with you one thing, and then I think we'll move towards closing up. But yeah, I wanted to share Haji Akun with you. Now, so I've been a Baha'i a long time. I've been a Baha'i about 50 years, and this happens every time. You can't see this, but it's called, it's like the Tablets of the Divine Plan. It's a series of very brief letters, you could say, epistles even, that were written by the son of Baha'u'llah. If you haven't had a chance to experience Baha'u'llah's writings, or if you know little about him, I highly recommend you take some time to learn about the wonder of Baha'u'llah's life and the tremendously stirring and uplifting writings and the example of his life. One of the great mysteries of his life was that he produced a son that is unparalleled in religious history. His son was called Abdul Baha, and is someone who lived, he passed away in 1921. And so many of us have had the opportunity to meet people who met him. And so it's not a mythology. It's a tangible history that's close to us. Well, Abdul Baha came to the United States and Canada in 1912. And when he spoke about the unique role of the United States in bringing about global peace. And this was 2 years before the First World War began. And in fact, he warned about the First World War and said, if we don't start addressing these issues, there'll be great and unnecessary suffering that humanity will go through. But the purpose of all that suffering is to shake us loose from our blindness and our prejudices of race, our prejudices of sexism and of classism and of nationalism and ethnocentrism. All of these things that have divided humanity, they all have to go. And he gave instruction on how to create something new for humanity, a united planet. So in about 1916-17, he wrote these, they're called tablets. They're like letters essentially, or epistles that he sent to different parts of the United States. Now, one of them, or actually there's two that were written to the New England states, or the northeastern states. So in this tablet, Abdul Baha says that this particular part of the country has the capacity for two special distinctions. Well, actually, he doesn't even say capacity. He says that there are two distinctions of this region of the country. The one is what he calls faith, and the other is assurance. Faith and assurance. Now, Abdul Baha had this tendency to look at someone and say, you are enormously patient, and this wonderful quality of you, I'm actually going to give you a new name. Your new name is patience, in Arabic, let's say, and the person would say, I'm not patient. Ask my wife. I'm not patient at all. I'm the opposite of patient. And Bill would say, no, your name is now patience. Or he would describe qualities that people had potentially, like these gems we were talking about. And then their job was to bring them out. Their life's purpose now was to mine those gems and bring them out. So Abdul Baha was able to see what their special gifts were. Now, and for this region of the country, he said these two capacities for faith and assurance were distinguishing characteristics for this part of the country. Well, I live in New England. I can tell you, I don't see much faith and assurance. I see a lot of anger and resentment and fear. But what Abdul Baha is saying is that if we manage our fears correctly, if we manage this sense of challenge correctly, what we will arrive at is individuals who are like Haji Akund, right? And that's our job, is to become like Haji Akund as best we can, right? So that fear isn't governing our life, but that this deep-rooted assurance is what Abdul Baha calls it, in this river of life, this river of loving kindness, of this river of the ever-present support and nurturance of an all-loving, all-forgiving God, that if we become rooted in that and have an assurance in it, then we can bring out our own personal best qualities and bring them to service to the world to help it unite. The point is, every region of the world has its own qualities, its own special gifts. And the truth of the matter is, every human being has access to this faith and assurance. Faith being, let's say, what you believe, right? But assurance is not just what you believe, but who you've become, right? That sense of deep calm and poise, that even in the face of torture, like Haji Akund, you're absolutely peaceful. Right? So now it's ironic that I work in Newtown, where the sense of loss is acute, and it hasn't gone away. And how can you ask someone who's lost a child or a sibling or a neighbor to not feel that loss, right? So part of the Jewish tradition is to see the loss without diversion, without averting the gaze, right? But to see what is, and to have confidence and faith despite what it is. In other words, a sense that there's an overarching providence that leads all things to good. That same thought is in every religion. But this is what, if there is a spiritual path that's worth pursuing, to me, this is it. It's not whether or not we have a certain belief in 12 principles, or as important as those are, until humans find a way to expand this sense of assurance and draw strength from it in the midst of life's many cruelties and crushing burdens, until we can find that sense of deep assurance that what we believe means little, right? Because it won't be expressed in dampening down our contributions to the suffering of others. Until we find a way to access that sense of assurance, we will be finding ways to be dominant over someone else, in the misguided notion that by being dominant, that we're quieting our fears, or that we're quieting the cause of our fears, or by acquiring more money, we're going to be, somehow filling this emptiness, or that by somehow, again, dominating some other person, that somehow will be softening the blow of death. Right? So this is the task. So I thought we would just begin there. And do you see how none of this has anything to do with a particular religion? This is the human dilemma. We're all faced with these dilemmas every moment of every day. So there's one final thing I wanted to share with you. It's a beautiful Baha'i prayer from Abdul Baha. And I just wanted to read it to you. If I can just open it up here so I can see. Okay, here it is. It's a prayer of Abdul Baha. And in these prayers, you'll notice that there's very little about changing my outer circumstances. His prayers are very instructive. It's not only a way to commune with the fullness of life and God's movement in our lives, but it's also instructive and educational. So here's this beautiful prayer that I saw this morning I wanted to share with you. It says, "O thou beloved of my heart and soul." So it starts with love. "I have no refuge save thee. I raise no voice at dawn save in thy commemoration and praise. Thy love encompasseth me, and thy grace is perfect. My hope is in thee. Oh God, give me a new life at every instant and bestow upon me the breaths of the Holy Spirit at every moment, in order that I may remain steadfast in thy love, attain unto great felicity, perceive the manifest light, and be in the state of utmost tranquility and submissiveness. Verily, thou art the giver, the forgiver, the compassionate. So there it is. Give me a new life at every instant and bestow upon me the breaths of the Holy Spirit at every moment. So cultivating this capacity, I think, is really what a spiritual path is about. Abdu'l-Baha says that as we progress on the spiritual path, we develop spiritual susceptibilities and spiritual perceptions. One last comment, and then I'll wrap up. We know from human neurology and the human development that when a child is born, they're pretty much programmed from infancy to be to survive, right? They're not yet able to be fully sociable. They don't have language. So the brain stem, the part of the brain that controls everything automatic, is really pretty much on fully blown, and it's running the show. And the other part of the brain, the cortex, that is our higher thinking, that we might even say contains those gems, right? It's latent, right? And it needs development, cultivation. So over time, what we want to do is quiet down the brainstem and the fight or flight response that runs a lot of our life, the fear, right? The fight or flight. So if you're fighting or fleeing, fear can be a big part of that, right? So that's all brainstem activation. We want to quiet that down and wake up the cortex, the part that's thinking, the part that joins with other people, the part that sees meaning and value in contributing to the larger circle of life, right? So prayers like this cultivate that process where we know that it's possible to, at every instant, to feel at every moment a sense of loving assurance and great felicity and tranquility and submissiveness. This prayer is teaching us that, oh yeah, beneath all my fears is this capacity for infinite love, for tranquility, for felicity and submissiveness. So that's what I invite you to investigate. And when you're learning about the Baha'i faith or any religious teaching, I would invite you to look below fear and below the things that divide us and below the divisions and isms and doctrines and dogmas and prejudices that keep us apart, and look for this common yearning of all hearts to find this sense of assurance, this sense of felicity, this sense of tranquility that we all share, and this great gift of life we've been given, that somehow we'll be worthy of this gift together. All right, friends, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Woodall. This is really, I feel like it hit a lot of themes beyond, the topic of fear. So thank you so much. If anyone has questions now, we have time. You can put it in the chat. The first question is, I wonder about the idea of fear of God in all religious beliefs. If our relationship is based on loving each other and trusting God, why do we need to fear him?
Yeah, and this is something that I really struggled with it myself, for just the reasons you asked. Wait a minute, I thought God is a loving God. Why do I have to fear him? Well, yeah, I remember I was praying about this a long time ago, and I had a dream. I'll tell you the dream and how I kind of understood it. And in the dream, I was on this in this big field, a beautiful field. There were flowers all over. There were many people, and there was this sense of real joy among all the people I was with. And it was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. And all of a sudden, have you ever experienced the light of an eclipse, a solar eclipse, where suddenly things go a little bit gray, and then and that happened. Suddenly, all the light in everywhere looked dimmer, and I looked up at the sun, and the sun was wobbling and shrinking. It was getting smaller. And the sense in the dream was that the sun was disappearing, right? And I thought, oh my God, we're all going to die. And not only we're all going to die, but the planet's just going to be spinning out in the middle of space. We're all nothingness. We're about to hit nothingness. And then I woke up and I thought, fear of God, fear of God. So it's not so much one aspect. I think there's probably several answers, and that's one of the confusing things about this idea of the fear of God. On the one hand, it's the sense of that dream, that there is this infinite source of bounty and life that in its infinite complexity and wonder is a gift of profound, unspeakable joy and gratitude, and causes us to feel humble and open to this wonderful gift. So that experience of life is the beginning of kind of a fullness of an engagement with life. So in one sense, fear of God is not having that, right? Or not allowing that in, right? So that somehow I will veil myself from the full richness of life's gifts, right? Of God's gifts, right? So it's a fear of God in the sense of I will somehow withdraw myself from all that's wonderful and a gift to me, right? So it's really about me and how I set myself up to all that is and the wonder that is life. Am I, through fear or arrogance or whatever, veiling myself from the wonder of all that is? Now, but there's another part of it, and I think it probably is fear. The fear of, well, wait a minute, what if I really mess up and hurt somebody? What if God gets mad at me? That's not a good thing. Or maybe part of what I did just now, and I got, the Hindus talk about karma. Baha'is don't have that same concept. But, we've all had the experience. We do something and we're like, ooh, I can't believe I did that. And then bad things happen, right? Is that God punishing us? Or, well, I think we need to have a sense of trepidation and, maybe even fear about denying others even, or doing things that are really either immoral or unhelpful or harmful, or that in some way, well, let me back up. That one way to look at sin, it's not so much that like there's a list of bad things that you can do and a list of good things, and you want to do the list of good things, but don't do any of the things on the bad list. Okay, I when we were talking to your 8-year-old, that's how you kind of, but as adults, I think it really does go back to this Jewish notion of that not being aware of what really is, right, and diverting our gaze from what really is, so that we can avoid discomfort, the fear of a consequence, that we don't want to see that this is a real terrible thing that just happened, or that what I just did had really negative consequences, and I fear the consequence, so I don't look at it. So in one notion of sin to Jews is that we're looking away from what's true because we fear a consequence. So what a fear of God in that sense is that we're honest enough and we have confidence enough in the wholeness of life that we can look it right in the eye, right, and see what really is and say, this isn't good, right? This situation in my life, the way I'm relating to my wife, the way I'm relating to my kids, the way I'm relating at work, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing a very good job, right? I gotta deal with this. So that's a kind of fear of God too. And we can attribute that to God himself and say, God doesn't want me to do this. And that's true. But we can see it ethically in our relationship with each other. So there's an interesting statement in the Baha'i writings that says that fear God and nothing else. What an interesting thought. Fear God and nothing else. So, I think it gets to this idea that there's this abundance of life that we're invited to imbibe, to take in. There's a statement of Baha'u'llah where he says, the entire duty of man in this day is to, oh, I'm going to mess it up. The entire duty of man in this day is to drink deep of the billowing ocean of joy that God has destined for him. And I just butchered the quote, but it's something that's let's call that a paraphrase. So that I would do something that would deprive me of a flood of gifts, right? So it's not that there's a bad list and a good list. It's just that there's a way of being that connects to this river of life, this river of bountiful love, that why would I deprive myself of any of that? And that certain types of behavior are like floodgates that stop the flow. And so why would I should be a little bit afraid of doing that stuff? Not because there's a checklist, right? But because the universe is all about bounty. It's all about grace and wonderful gifts and exuberance, right? And why would I deprive myself of that? So these are just some thoughts about the fear of God.
I liked your discussion of faith and assurance. Can you explain again what the difference is, or what is assurance?
Yeah, my take, and I'm not an Arab scholar, so I don't know the words in the Arabic or Persian. I think they're written in both languages. My take is that faith is there are two versions of the same thing. That faith, and this is my take, that faith is, I have a way of viewing the world. I believe that Baha'u'llah is the promised one of all ages, and I can cite reasons why I think that, and what Baha'u'llah's proofs are. I believe that men and women are equal, and I try to understand that in as many ways that I can. This is a basic Baha'i teaching. I believe that I need to be open-minded and to be investigating truth independently. Another core Baha'i teaching. I believe that all races share the same human dignity, and they all have precious gifts to contribute to the whole of humanity. Basic idea, basic Baha'i idea. These are beliefs. So I think the realm of faith is the realm of belief, right? But assurance is the realm of being, right? Who am I, right? What am I, right? Am I engaged in this process of unfolding? There's a wonderful quote in the Quran where it says that God desired to perfect his light, right? So it's this notion that this perfection of the creation is always unfolding. There's a wonderful physicist, David Bohm, who talks about the implicate and explicate order. We have this notion of dark matter and matter, or dark energy and energy, that most of the universe is dark energy and dark matter. And that David Bohm talked about how all this energy that we don't see in the universe is somehow latent, but then it becomes manifest in stars, and so matter is kind of always moving between matter and antimatter. So in the realm of physics, but that most of the universe is unseen. It's in the antimatter stage. So in a similar way, that most of human capacity, most of what it means to be human, is hidden from us, right? It's our life's purpose to bring out the implicate, bring out the hidden, bring out the latent, bring out these gems from the minds, the true minds of our human nature, and that it's an eternal process. And now I've completely forgot the question, but I was going on about, what was the question?
Asking the difference between faith and assurance.
Yeah. So assurance is that sense of connectedness to that core part of what we really are. It's more than what we believe. It's your loving kindness. It's your sacrifice for your children. It's your sacrifice for the neighbor's kids. It's the sacrifice of my neighbor. I didn't tell you how we found Tenny, my dog. My neighbor, my wife texted my neighbors, and we got a great neighborhood. And so the guys across the street, one of them got in his car and started looking for our dog. He found our dog. So he sacrificed his Saturday morning at 5:30, to go look for our dog. That's a gem. right? So that's his kindness, that's his self-sacrifice, that's his love, that's his perseverance, that's his, right? And so those are his gems. So engaging that part of who we are derives from this growing sense of assurance that we're pulling from ourselves capacities we didn't know we had, that are mining these deep veins of capacity. Baha'u'llah talks about them in so many ways. And Abdul Baha, in terms of attaining the station of guidance, is one of the way he talks about it, or tapping into the powers of the supreme concourse, that there are these, oh, this is a wonderful notion, that when a soul passes into the next world, that they become the leaven for creative thought and science and inspiration to those still living. Just like leaven in bread causes the bread to rise, that these souls in the next world are causing the inspiration and creativity and scientific discoveries of those still alive in this world. Or, we've all had the experience, your parent is maybe passed and some weird thing happens and you go, boy, that reminds me of mom. That feels like mom. Well, probably was, according to Baha'i thinking. So assurance is that sense of that these capacities, these spiritual powers are moving through us and that we are a part of them. And there is confidence and grace and peace and security in that knowledge. And that peace and security and knowledge quiets fear.
So you talked about the concepts of death and emptiness. So do you think overcoming the fear of emptiness is realizing that there is this higher meaning, or by realizing that really everything in this world is meaningless and impermanent? Or do you think it's both?
I mean, it's a great question. I think the Buddhists are right, and the Baha'i short obligatory prayer says the same thing. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my poverty and to thy wealth, that there are certain forces we have no control over. Death, meaning and purpose. But this whole issue with purpose is a funny one, isn't it? Because on the one level, or let's go to the emptiness one. On the one hand, I'm sure all of us, there have been moments where we feel, I don't know how I fit in the world. I don't know who I really am. I don't know. I'm such a mystery to myself, let alone my wife. How do I understand anything, right? And where we just feel like the whole world is a big question mark. So, but below that, then there's even it's possible to have a sense of real emptiness, that where is value and meaning within us, and we can come up empty, right? And feel that, I don't know where there is, I don't know how to put words on this inner experience of vastness and emptiness. So to the Buddhists, they say, embrace that emptiness. That's a good thing. It's you've let go of your identity as John, or as the doctor, or as the guy who gives talks, right? And something bigger is happening. Now, if I'm attached to the idea of me, right, then when I experience that vast emptiness, it's terrifying, right? And I have patients who are terrified at what they describe as of emptiness. I'm empty. I'm completely empty. And because they want to not be empty and they want to be a person, they feel afraid, right? To the Buddhists, they'd say, yeah, you're there. All you got to do is let go, right? And because that emptiness isn't about you, it's about the vast universe unfolding within you. Right? Does that make sense? And so, and then once you do that, that vast emptiness isn't empty at all. It's actually undulating with loving creative power and recreating capacity. So this is why I think we've really confused what a spiritual path is in our Western culture. Where there's the theology of, what do they call it? wealth, right? Right. Where the whole idea is that if you pray hard enough, God's going to give you $1 million, right? And just stuff like that. That God's going to make you rich, and it has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with creating people who are unhappy and feel judgmental. Oh my God, I don't have wealth, but they do. So now I'm envious, and so it's the opposite of spiritual. But spirituality, I really think, is about this seeing beneath fear, seeing beneath all these trappings to this vastness that, in the final analysis, is what we all are headed to, right? And at some point, if we're blessed enough to not die tragically, all of us must face, how do we let go of these attachments to the career I had, to my kids, to the role I played in their lives, to and now they have to take care of me. I'm the one who takes care of them. Now I'm not going to go to the assisted leg. I'm not going to do that, right? All these kind of things we have to let go of that are so poignantly human, right? But really are at the core of this issue of fear and a letting go into this immensity. So, as we move towards our own death, it's really a process of letting go into the immense gratitude and a newfound humility that is really redefining of what we thought of as ourself, right? And to show our loved ones, and in some ways, I've had this conversation with many people who are passing, that one of the greatest gifts they can give their children is that sense of calm assurance as they pass. So to free their children of the fear of losing them, right? And by letting go into the loving embrace of the infinite, right? It's a great challenge. It's the profoundest gift, I think. I think it's the profoundest gift of. It's the profoundest parenting act. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's all we have. So thank you so much again, Dr. Woodall. This was a great talk, and I'll thank you also for answering our questions afterwards.
Yeah, my pleasure. My love to all of you, and thank you for being there. And I think this is going to wind up on your page, probably on the Baha'is of Newtown page, and Baha'is, on the Facebook. And God bless all of you, and may we all grow in love and assurance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our speaker next week will be Anthony Vance. And yes, this talk will be recorded. It'll be on our YouTube channel, which I've put the link to in the chat. And if you also want to be on our mailing list, I've put the link to that as well. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.